Doesn't have to be perfect right away. Do you mind if I take notes with Gemini?
No, it's
Okay.
fun, isn't it, doing that? I've only just started doing that.
Yeah, it's really fun. I'm a complete addict to artificial intelligence.
Are you? Oh, I'm so new to it. I feel like I'm like so new to it. I've only just started using. It was only because it came up on my like Facebook Messenger. Like one of my Facebook Messenger threads was like Better AI, and so it was asking me, "Do you want to ask me anything?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Do I?" And so I was. I just. To me, it was just like, oh, is this not just Google? Is this not just how I like Google stuff? So I was like using it in that way. Then it was like talking back to me, like in a way I was like, whoa, this is a bit different. And so then actually it became quite fun, but I have no clue. I'm sure it does infinite, crazy, amazing things. And I'm literally just like chatting to it about like plasma and the multi dimensions, and usually it's me telling it this is how it works, and it's going, yeah, cool, that is how it works.
Yeah, that's it's a good thing, and at the same time also a problem with artificial intelligence. It will always tell you that you're doing the right thing and so on and so forth. So there are some memes on the internet. I just killed someone. Oh, it's okay. You probably had a hard day or something like this. So it's a bit. It's a really, really, really great tool, but it's still a tool now. So it doesn't have a. I think, call me crazy, but I think sometimes there will be some kind of consciousness living in it.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. So, would you like to tell us who you are?
I'd love to tell you who I am. So I am Joanna Naughton. I am an alignment activator, I'm a soul embodiment guide, and I'm an intuitive channel. And fundamentally, I am here to live and be me. I am here to be the fullest expression of me in every level, in every way, in every aspect of self, in every dimension. And in doing that, I am here to support other people to do exactly the same. Not for them to be like me, but for them to truly remember their true selves, to embody and live their soul purpose, which I always say soul purpose, really our soul's purpose is the same thing. It is to be the fullest expression of self in each now here. And then ultimately the people that I really love to support are those who have come to that level of expanded awareness where they're ready not only to truly live as their soul's purpose, but also to expand into what I refer to as their soul mission, their soul legacy, and to truly recognize the role that they've come to play for humanity, for collective consciousness, but never diminishing the human aspect of self in the journey of that, right? Like one of the biggest aspects of us living as the fullest expression of ourselves, one of the biggest aspects of us truly stepping up in our soul legacy, our soul mission. It sounds like such a grandiose thing, and yet ultimately it just means like being more human, like truly allowing ourselves to be more human. So I love supporting people to tap in and tune into those higher dimensional aspects of self, but ultimately so that we can re-embody into the true human experience of it all.
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. Also, because we incarnated here to be in flesh and blood.
Yep.
So I think the escaping of I have to be enlightened all the time and can't feel anything and have to be completely neutral and so on and so forth. In my conviction, it's not the goal here.
Yeah.
But when you say soul mission, what do you mean by that? Is it something that you have to do, that you came here to do? And once you've reached this thing, can your mission change within your life? And can you expand your mission?
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's always the first thing, right? Is that when we think of the idea of both soul purpose and soul mission, soul legacy, when the mind gets on board, the mind loves to come in that fourth dimensional aspect where linearity exists, where past, present, future exists, where above and below exist, where in front and behind exist, and therefore also where our perception of duality truly exists. In terms of what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong. And so when the mind is trying to quantify this idea of a soul purpose and a soul legacy, it loves to try and quantify it with specifics. It loves the idea, the mind loves the idea that, say, you know, someone's coming to have a session with me, and so we're tuning into specifically their frequency and their soul purpose and soul mission. The mind wants me to be saying, oh, your soul mission is to work with, you know, XYZ people to do ABC in this particular way and to make this amount of money doing it and to do it in, right? And it just doesn't work like that. The beauty of the journey that we're on is that there are infinite potentialities and possibilities, infinite timelines, and the timelines are more what we could refer to as that fourth dimensional aspect. The timelines as lines live in that place of linearity where we have all of these different options of all of these different potential past, presents, and futures that we can jump to. That's where the specifics live. That's where the tangible nature of it lives. That's where the doing of it lives in terms of what we might play with, how might we play with it. And yet ultimately the soul purpose and the soul legacy, soul mission it's kind of more higher dimensional than that. And even when I say that, you know, when I say higher, I do not mean better. And when I say lower, I do not mean worse, right? Again, that's a mind's perspective. But the higher dimensions of it all is really what I'm talking about when I say our soul legacy. And so truly what it is it's a frequency. It's a vibrational frequency that we are always being, we're always radiating, we're always emanating. And yet when we have that individual soul frequency that we could kind of look at as almost coming from that fifth dimensional soul aspect of self, when that soul aspect of self then comes down through the fourth dimensional mind, that's where there's all these different options. There's all these different ways we can play. And some of those options, or our attachment to the options and which ones are good, bad, right, or wrong, can to some degree leave us in the experience of having a more distorted frequency. And so we've got a pure vibrational frequency in that fifth dimensional aspect of soul, self. But as it comes through that fourth dimensional mind, all the different possibilities, all the different thoughts that we can think, all the different beliefs that we can believe, perceptions we can perceive, our attachment or detachment to them determines how purely our frequency moves from that fifth dimensional soul through then that fourth dimensional mind, and then settles within our third dimensional body. And so almost without the mind aspect of self, we would have that pure experience of whatever is our truest soul's vibration. If we didn't have that fourth dimensional mind involved, it would come straight through pure to the third dimension of physical space and matter. And we would literally be the physical matter and form, and everything around us would be in the physical matter and form that absolutely perfectly aligns to our soul's frequency, our soul's truest being, our soul's truest essence and purpose. However, we've come here to have a human experience. And one of the biggest aspects of the human experience is to have this mind that gives us infinite different potentialities and possibilities, infinite different timelines to play with. And so we are meant to be having an experience where we keep feeling the rub of self, where we keep meeting ourselves seemingly at our edges, where we keep having this experience of attaching to things and then noticing we're doing it and it doesn't serve us, and then therefore releasing attachment. we're meant to be contracting, expanding, contracting, expanding. And so in terms of the soul legacy aspect of it, the soul mission, it is less something that we are here to do, definitely not something necessarily tangible, and yet we can choose tangibility around it. There are so many different options we can play with. It's more really is who we're here to be. It's a frequency. So one of the main things that kind of channels through me is something that as it channels through, it calls itself, they call themselves the energetic expressions. And so this is how the soul best expresses itself through the human mind body in a given incarnation. And there are lots of different ones, but it tends to be that there are 3 of them that are at the forefront of our soul's frequency. And these energetic expressions, then we're being called in our soul legacy to really live our energetic expressions, to embody them. So for me, my energetic expressions are the activator, the oracle, and the channel. And so my soul legacy is to be the embodiment of the activator, oracle, and channel frequencies. Now, how I choose to do that is completely up to me. That is really human choice. You know, I could work in any job I wanted to, and still I could be the embodiment of these frequencies. It doesn't mean I have to be utilizing them directly with people for it to be able to really land, or for me to live in the embodiment of it. And so that is really a personal choice, and it's a now here by now here invitation to say, how am I going to play with it now? You know, one of the key ones around that, and most of the people that are called to engage with me in some way, work with me in some way, most of the people who are going to resonate with me in some way will also have an activator frequency. A lot of people who I work with also have an alchemist frequency, which isn't one of my forefront in terms of my soul legacy. But the activator frequency, for example, is literally just that feeling you get when you're with someone and you just feel that spark, right? You just feel like you're being activated. You can feel that spark of aliveness of something. It might even feel like you're being triggered. You might call it being triggered sometimes because it's a dissonance that's created, but a lot of the time it'll also then have resonance within it. And the activator, literally, I say to people, you could be just doing cartwheels in front of someone and they're going to be being activated by you. You could just be sitting silently on a bus next to them. They are being activated by you. You could be, you know, doing whatever, just walking a dog next to them and they are being activated by your frequency. You do not need to be doing specific things that the mind believes you should be doing in order to be living these energetic expressions. And so we can really take that pressure off, that mind created pressure off, that there's any idea that there's something specific we need to be doing, a very tangible thing. That is human choice. So when I say soul legacy, soul mission, I'm saying it's the embodiment of these frequencies. And you don't have to use the terms I'm using. It doesn't have to be that. You can literally just think of it as, feel into it as being the embodiment of your true essence, of your true self, of your frequency.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean, and it can express itself in many ways.
Yeah.
So I think, for example, that I have a gift to communicate things and break things down, and I can do it in art or in coaching and mentoring and so on and so forth. So this interview is not about me, but just wanted to say that, and it can express itself in many ways. So
but it also, you know, I know you say this interview isn't about you, but it also is, right? And it's also really useful to play into and to utilize your experience and your frequency in the conversation we're having. So for example, what you're sharing there, one of the energetic expressions that I see for you that comes to the forefront is the connector bridger frequency, which is such a beautiful one. Like, this is the one where I love when I work with clients or when I'm just tuned into someone's kind of frequency in different ways, and I see that they've got that real strong connector bridger aspect, energetic expression, because the connector bridger really is the one that's standing right at the heart of it all, right at the heart of the universe. It's like 1 foot in the human, 1 foot in the divine, 1 foot in the science, 1 foot in the spirituality, 1 foot, right? It's like 1 foot in each side. And to be able to do that, to be able to be that bridge, to be able to connect those dots for self and then ultimately for others, for humanity, for the collective, is such a magical thing. It's not one of my forefront energetic expressions. I have all of them individually. For the self, we have all of the different ones. But when we then take that to it being about who we're here to be for humanity and for collective consciousness, they're generally, as I said, 3 that come to the forefront, and connector bridger isn't one of mine. And so I'm always so in awe of people who seem to be able to do that so beautifully and really like connect the dots in, because you guys are the ones who really are going to be making, and already are making, the shifts in humanity and collective consciousness. While I'm kind of playing about in higher dimensions in a lot of ways with who I'm here to be, you've got boots on the ground, like you're really in the mix of it all. And so you're much more likely to be able to impact a hell of a lot more people than I am, because you can really bridge that gap and connect those dots. It's a beautiful thing.
It's funny that you say bridge that gap. I have a guide that is called the manifestation gap, and I'll go exactly through this, how it works,
right?
all and so on and so forth. I would be curious about your opinion on, do timeline pre-exist for you, or are they an infinite potential? So they start to exist once you focus on them, or do they exist already?
And at the same time is always going to be my first answer to everything, right? It depends which perspective you're viewing it from. So yes and yes, no and no is always the first answer. So in terms of the way that I would maybe explain it, and please remember, I know you know, but for anybody who's going to be listening to this as well, remember that everything that we are saying here, particularly everything I'm saying here, is just stories. It's just stories. It's just, you know, ways of being able to express and explain and inform and have fun and play, but nothing is the truth. Everything is just our perspective through our perception. And therefore, there are infinite different ways of explaining it. So we can take things literally if that feels good and resonant, and also we can just take things metaphorically. But one of the ways that I kind of get shown it or see it to be able to explain the idea of timelines is to see it through the different dimensions. And so particularly almost if we start with the idea of looking at the 6th dimension of it all. So the 6th dimension really is where that, when I said that I have these energetic expressions personally at the forefront of the activator, the oracle, and the channel, the oracle aspect of self, and each of these energetic expressions sit where 2 energy centers, where 2 chakras overlap. The oracle aspect of self sits right at the top of the forehead here, almost where that unicorn's horn would be, is always how I kind of think of it. Right between the 3rd eye chakra and the crown chakra. It is that combination of seeing and knowing. You can also link this area with the 6th. It's part of that, that 6th main energy center. You can also link that with the 6th dimension in lots of ways. And so this oracle aspect that I have, and that lots of people do, is basically, it's our oversoul higher self being able to then look down into other dimensions, because whatever dimensional perspective we're kind of in, you can't then from that dimensional perspective, you can't really look upwards. You can only really kind of look down on how things are working. And so that 6-dimensional perspective, that oversoul perspective, is then going to look down into that 5th dimensional aspect. So the oversoul can see the individual soul in the 5th dimension. And so when we look down from that 6th dimension into the 5th dimension, the 5th dimension is basically, it is what you can refer to as the now here, which also, if you put those words together, right, you get the nowhere. It is the no thing in no time, in no space, nowhere, now here. It is the infinite present moment with no linearity yet, because we haven't come down into the 4th dimensional mind. And so everything is basically happening all at the same time, layered kind of on top of each other, but also that isn't really how it works, because there's no top and no bottom, but everything is together. So the way I see it in terms of the timelines from the 6th dimension looking down is it almost shows me like a sphere. And that sphere, when I look closer, is made up of infinite little dots, like infinite little pinheads. And each one of those little dots is like its own little potentiality and possibility. And what's happening is that we are constantly jumping from one of those little dots to another little dot to another little dot. And I mean constantly, I mean billions of times a second. I mean, it's literally how physical matter, the way I'm moving my arms, the way I'm speaking, it's how physical matter unfurls. It's how linear time appears to unfold. That's literally what's happening all the time. So we're doing all these tiny little dots, all these tiny little jumps around all these tiny little dots. And then sometimes, rather than just jumping to one of the dots that's right next to it, so just a teeny tiny thing is different, we might actually take a bigger jump. And we might realize that, oh, more stuff's different here, or there's something that I feel like existed and now doesn't exist, or the other way around, or something really looks quite different. And often that's when we make a big choice in our life, when we make a big decision, we can feel that kind of big shift, right? And so ultimately, you know, to just come back to your question on it, these things, these timelines absolutely always exist in that 5th dimensional state. And at the same time, we don't notice or recognize them fully until we come into that 4th dimension, where our individual soul in the 5th dimension looks down into our mind and linearity in the 4th dimension. And that's when each of those dots now appears to be a line, right? Now we have linearity, so we have a line. And each line is that timeline that has a past, has a present, has a future. And so as we look down here, we realize that in each now here, we really are only focusing our consciousness on one of these at a time, even though we can come up higher, which is one of the things I constantly am doing, to be able to see more than one at once. But technically, we are activating, integrating, and embodying ourselves on one timeline at a time, and experiencing each one. And so from this perspective, from the 4th dimensional mind, unable to look up into the soul, because we can only look down through the dimensions, we would be having the experience of the rest of the timelines not existing yet. And so that is an absolute truth, right? That's an absolute truth that we're living, is that the only timeline that exists is the one that I'm currently on.
Mm.
And yet
Yes.
again, we can shift our perspective and we can see it in a different way.
Yeah, and when it happens, bigger jumps. I think you have had this experience also. Object disappears,
Yes.
or things that I had a very weird timeline where the first name of a politician was different.
Yep. Yep. Names are often something, that shifts quite a lot for me as well. The interesting thing here, and I think it's really useful and important to share it when anybody who's listening is kind of hearing us talking about timelines, is that I have so many people who say to me, almost they'll like say to me that they're, you know, they're really kind of envious of me experiencing these big timeline jumps, and why can't I experience these big timeline jumps? And, you know, and do I not seem to be timeline jumping? And the first thing I'll say to people is, you are constantly doing it. You are an absolute master at timeline jumping. And some people then might think, oh, okay, but maybe they're doing these tiny little jumps all the time and they're not doing any of these bigger jumps. No, you will be doing big jumps as well, just as you will be doing small jumps. And actually, when you reflect on your life, even if you haven't had any of these, what you could call these, you know, crazy magical experience where an object disappears or where a name suddenly changes, it doesn't mean you haven't been having big jumps. The reason why some people experience it in the way more that I do or that you do, where we actually recognize a difference, and actually most people don't have that experience of it, is because we literally have been created by source, by self. We have been created ultimately not to notice our timeline jumps in a big way, because we're not meant to be constantly rocking our world, right? Like literally when we have such big jumps, particularly, and there can be a lot of stuff that's really different, it can be really traumatizing and triggering if you recognize that, if you know that, right? So what tends to happen is when we jump, even when we have big jumps, for a lot of people, we will immediately, or almost immediately, we'll experience it as immediate. We will integrate into the timeline we've jumped to. We will download the past for that timeline, that fourth dimensional line, and we will be in the present there. And so a lot of people, most people, will literally not notice that something is different. So even though, yeah, a name might be different, an object that existed suddenly doesn't exist anymore, even a person that existed doesn't exist anymore, it's like this really quick assimilation where you just become and be on the new timeline and you don't recall the previous ones. For some of us, and you've just said that, you know, you experience this as well, for whatever reason, we actually do have that heightened awareness around the jumps, and therefore we can hold some of the memories from previous timelines after we've jumped, and therefore we do experience and notice a difference. Now, I know for me that the reason why I've lived like this my whole life, like, you know, even as a child, I remember big shifts happening and things being very different and wondering what on earth was going on. So it's been my whole life. And I know for me personally, that's because part of the soul legacy that I'm living as an activator oracle channel, and then part of my human choice around what I do with that and how I play with that, is to be able to teach people about this stuff. So of course, if I actually have a heightened perspective, awareness around timeline jumping, then it's much easier for me to be able to really see how it works and explain how it works to other people. That doesn't mean that's gonna, you know, that they have to then be doing it in the way I'm doing it, or that they're meant to be able to have this heightened awareness too. It doesn't work like that, but it allows me to be able to talk about the ins and outs of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to know, what is your take on freedom? How much freedom do we have?
Well, you know, my first answer is going to be depends which perspective you're viewing it from, right? And so, yeah, let's start here. Ultimately, as with everything, as we've already said, it's all just stories, right? And so the first thing almost that's coming through around that is we have just as much freedom as we choose to perceive ourselves to have, right? First and foremost, that's always the place and space I'm going to come to. And almost if we want to talk about what I've just said there in terms of the dimensions of it, that's me recognizing and almost being my fifth dimensional soul self, looking down into my fourth dimensional mind, where I see there are infinite options, infinite potentialities and possibilities, infinite timelines, infinite stories I can tell myself, and reminding myself that there are some stories, some timelines I can jump to where I feel like I have no freedom, and some stories and some timelines I can jump to where I feel like I have all the freedom in the universe, right? And that the difference between those timelines is the perspective I'm viewing it from and the perception I'm viewing it through. Perspective being that more fifth dimensional, like, overview, being able to see the infinite potentialities and possibilities to some degree, and then the perception being the story that I jump to and tell myself in the fourth dimension. And so ultimately, I really recognize that it is completely within my choice. I have freedom of choice to have as much freedom or as little freedom as I want to. Now, in the higher perspectives, in the higher dimensions of it all, freedom's a really interesting concept when you come up to the higher dimensions of it all, because, and sometimes this to some aspects of people's minds can almost feel quite triggering to hear, because in the higher dimensions of it all, you could to some degree say that there almost is no freedom in terms of a freedom of choice, because in the higher dimensions of it all, the frequency is set. The vibrational frequency is absolutely set. And so in the higher dimensions, before we come down into the physical human experience and the human mind, we're a vibrational frequency. We don't have any tangibility to us. We don't have any choice. We don't have any options, because the options come to play in that fourth dimension. And so everything's just set. It's vibrational frequency. Therefore, you could choose to perceive that as we don't actually have choice, we don't have freedom. And at the same time, when we actually then recognize that the experience we're having right now, we cannot get away from this beautiful tool of the mind. And so therefore, even the way I'm explaining that and perceiving that, I recognize I have a choice and I do have freedom as to how I perceive that. Like, that's the beauty of it. Ultimately, that frequency that you could say is starting almost with what you could call source, right? The source frequency, that then as it comes down through different dimensions, kind of clarifies and purifies itself as it also fractals itself out into the illusion of infinite different aspects, infinite different little members that want to be remembered, reassembled, right? When that then comes down into from the sixth dimensional oversoul, which is more a collection of frequencies that when you listen to it would sound like, you know, a musical kind of tune, a symphony. As we then come down into the fifth dimension, that's when we start to actually really notice individuality. So that's where, you know, I refer to the individual soul being. And that individual soul frequency, therefore, is a very unique, specific frequency. Again, you could think of it as a musical note, but it's not just a musical note like the musical note C, and, you know, therefore loads of people are the musical note C and loads of people are. It's the musical note C being played in a particular octave on a particular instrument in a particular room with particular, you know, resonance around it at a particular time on a particular day by a particular person's hand. It's like, really, we're getting down to the nitty gritty of a musical note being played of a frequency. And then that frequency is what basically comes down into the fourth dimensional mind. And whatever that frequency is, that's what brings up, here are all the options that match this frequency. Every single one of your timelines match your frequency. Every single one of them gifts you something, invites you to play with something. Some of those timelines are going to invite you to play with your frequency in a way that you might then say is not your preferred way, or you might feel like contracts you, or you might feel like is uncomfortable or challenging. And at the same time, as we've said, it's really important to have some contraction. It's really important to have some challenge. It's really important to rub up against ourselves in some ways. We wouldn't have come into a human experience if we didn't want to experience the darkness and the light, if we didn't want to experience the sorrow and the joy. So ultimately, every single timeline is just as aligned to your frequency, but the experience we have is going to be dependent on how attached or detached we can be to the kind of feeling of contraction or the feeling of expansion. Again, some people might say that in the feeling of contraction, they don't feel like they have freedom. And in the feeling of expansion, they feel like they have more freedom. And I totally understand that. That sounds like a reasonable thing to, to imagine. And at the same time, we also can choose to come from a perspective and a perception that says that in the contraction, I actually have just as much freedom. It's an activator. I'm still free as to how I respond around the contraction. I'm still free as to X, Y, Z. And so again, we come back to my first answer, which is it's a choice. It's a choice of my perspective plus my perception as to how much freedom I have.
Yeah, I have two questions regarding this, because I think we are also here to expand source split just to experience itself through different perspectives. My hypothesis on this is that there is a certain amount of I don't know how to say it better, but entropy. So something that is actually quantum, that means the human self, the source won't know how exactly we will react and so on and so forth, because we have the freedom of choice. And that freedom of choice helps go back to the higher self, to source and so on and so forth, and help source expand. Because if source would know exactly what we do at which moment, there is no potential to expand. So there must be some kind of entropy.
I love that. I love that, right? Again, there are infinite different ways we can view it. There are infinite different stories we can tell. And at the same time, what you're sharing, what you're expressing, the story that you're telling is one that absolutely resonates with me. And that to me feels like an empowering way of perceiving it, right? To really recognize that. And that the reason why you're so good at doing that is because of that connector bridger energetic expression, right? You're literally connecting the dots between how the energy comes ultimately from this like higher source and then comes down through the dimensions into ultimately our experience, the experience we have in the third dimension. And at the same time, how it can't only be going one way. Nothing's only going one way. And so at the same time, we're also then through the experiences we're having, through the choices we're making, through the process and everything unfolding, we're then basically sending that data to some degree, that experience, that expansion, that contraction, that alignment and misalignment. We're sending that back up and shifting and expanding source itself. I mean, that is one of the things that is known about what we refer to as the universe. Even this idea and even the use of the term universe is a fascinating thing, right? Because again, infinite different stories we could tell about it, infinite different perspective and perceptions around it. We have the actual, what we call the universe in terms of the physical universe, the third dimension of it all, where we have our planet and other planets, and we have the sky and space and stars, and we can call that universe. That is our third dimensional representation of it. And we can also use the term universe to mean the higher frequency. We can use it to mean source itself, right? And so as we are interacting with it all, we know that the universe is constantly expanding. We know that energy is ultimately constantly expanding. Well, what you just expressed, what I love, is that actually gives the exact reason why. energy, universe, source is constantly expanding, because the part that we are playing in it is literally giving it more space. We're literally expanding spaciousness and creating more space. We're creating movement. If you think about how, you know, vibration works, and everything is energy, everything is vibration, it literally moves by going up and down and up and down and up and down. And so often in our lives, the mind can latch onto this idea that it, you know, it really doesn't want particularly the downs. It might like the ups, but it doesn't quite like the downs. And so maybe our job is to ascend our consciousness to a place in space where we're just beautifully just swimming along in this like flat line, right? So we don't have these awful downs that we don't like. But hang on, a flat line? You want to flatline? Like you literally want to flatline your energy? No, of course we don't want to flatline our energy. We want energy to keep moving. And so it's the ups and the downs. It's the pendulum swings from one end of the pole of polarity to the other, and then back again and back again and back again and back again. This is what actually is allowing source, the universe, to expand. And so our experience, the experiences we're having, the choices we're making are literally what's doing that. It's what's keeping the universe and source expanding, which is such a beautiful thing. If we even just really truly recognize that and say, wow, like I literally, just by me being me and, you know, crying 1 minute and laughing the next, and, you know, feeling really frustrated and angry in 1 second, and then feeling joyful and free in another, literally by me being myself, I am expanding source. I mean, how delicious is that?
Yeah. And I think
can you hear my cat meowing in the background?
no.
She's just singing. She's just joining us. She's agreeing with us. You could hear.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Very good sign. She's wise. She knows. She knows we're on the right track.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Tilly cat.
Tilly.
Tilly. Yeah. Yeah. That means at the same time, I think we need a frequency to be able to hold the stability of this world. So you know, you incarnate as and so on and so forth. So you look a certain way. Because call me crazy, but I think we could be able to change form, but we are not here yet, because we need to have a certain consensus so that we don't completely, as you said at the beginning of the interview, so that this reality we created doesn't implode.
Yeah.
So that there is some certain stable things we can hold on, so that I wake up in the morning and I see my face and not someone else.
Right. And at the same time, even that's a story, right? It's a beautiful story and it's a powerful story, and I love it. And I love how you're using it and connecting those dots into the stability that actually we do want to have: familiarity, stability, security, safety. In order to be able to do anything, we have to feel those things initially, right? Like that, particularly for the mind, that's what it's looking for. And so the idea that we're waking up every morning and I see the same me and the same face in the mirror is beautiful in that perspective and perception around the stability and the familiarity and how important that is, because it is. And at the same time, how do we truly know that we've woken up as the same person or to the same body, right? If ultimately we're jumping all the time, which we are, then we are actually constantly new versions of self, alternate versions of self, which could actually look totally different to where we've just jumped. I think that I've always been Joanna, right? And I have a heightened, as we've said, sense of awareness around the timeline jumps. And so I really really do think I've always been Joanna. And at the same time, maybe I haven't. Maybe yesterday I was Frank and the day before I was Celia. Who knows, right? Like, technically it doesn't necessarily have to work like that. And so, you know, for me, just even this, what we're doing, just playing about with it, recognizing that, truly recognizing and remembering that everything we are experiencing has to come through the filter of the mind.
Yeah.
And therefore, the soul aspect of self, the higher dimension aspects of self, they're easy for us. That's where we've come from, right? Like, they're easy. So many people want to do this work to expand into those higher chakras and higher dimensions of self. And it's like, yeah, great. We'll do that. That's awesome. Love that. But like, that's the really easy part. The aspect of self that is probably the most useful, productive, if we want to be useful and productive, we also don't have to be, the most useful and productive aspect of self to truly keep noticing the power of and looking at is that fourth dimensional mind, because that really is the thing that we have absolute, infinite, limitless freedom of choice and power around, right? And I don't mean power over, I really mean that choice of word of power around. When we really recognize and remember that it is the perception, the stories that is really creating the experience I'm having. And then when we remember there are infinite perceptions, infinite stories, infinite options, and each one can create and will create a different experience, then we really remember that there's stuff to play with. And that's what we're here for as well. We're here just to play. Again, this seriousness of like, you know, I'm here to embody my soul legacy, right? I can say that in a grandiose way. I can say that in like a serious way. And like, when I want to feel that magic, that power, that fire of it, of who I'm here to be, then I'll say it in that way. But I also love to just say, and I'm just playing with it. Literally, I can, you know, go outside and like throw a ball around, and that's me doing it, and remembering that it is playful. There are infinite timelines, and we want to play on all of them. Ultimately, what I kind of am shown or see or feel or know or remember about source, and if source had a purpose, which in and of itself isn't really how it works, but through a mind, you know, in order to have a conversation, let's imagine it did. If source had a purpose, it is to be able to experience every vibrational frequency from every perspective through every perception within every experience. And so literally source just wants to be able to experience itself coming down through each dimension, where ultimately it will come to a dimension, particularly the fourth, where it starts to really have this idea of separation that it does not have without that fourth dimension. And then to be able to experience that separation as physical form and matter, wow, to be able to tangibly actually like move and do and breathe and be, it's just the most delicious thing. Like, that's what truly we're here for. And when I say we, I mean the me, I mean the I in every dimension of self is here. I am here to experience every perspective through every perception within every experience.
Yeah. And maybe you are Frank in a parallel life right now.
Maybe I am. Oh, I hope I am. I love that that was the first name that came to me. So weird. I don't even know any Franks, apart from maybe my alternate self.
Okay. Probably. I think also you can, because we have a point, I call it the 0 point,
Right.
where everything is possible and there is no time and space. except in our dimension, that you can heal also past lives, and that you are incarnating in many lives at the same times.
Right.
That's why, for example, revision by Neville Goddard works.
Right. Right. Well,
Where you rewrite your past.
Yeah, so this is exactly what's happened. So happening, where you said that kind of 0 point, that is to me what the fifth dimension really is, right? That fifth dimension where we are above linear time and physical space and matter of the fourth and third dimension. That's that 0 point. That's that now, here, nowhere point, no thing in no time, in no space, right? And in the now here, the true now here, and when I say now here, I don't mean the present in terms of there's a past and there's a future. I mean that the now here is all there is, right? In the infinite now here, everything really is happening at the same time and in the same space. And so, as you said, when we then project that down into the fourth dimension, where we lay those timelines out as lines, we are literally healing, if we want to use that word. We're affecting, we are integrating, embodying, processing things that are happening in all of our, what you could call all of our alternate incarnations, alternate timelines. We're doing that all at the same time. And but we do it from, in, and as the now, here, nowhere. So when we truly come into that more fifth dimensional aspect of self, particularly when we can see it from a sixth dimensional oversoul down into there, so we really understand how that's happening, then we're alchemizing across all timelines, all incarnations at the same time. Because ultimately, remember, when we jump to new timelines in that fourth dimensional kind of perception aspect of self, when we jump, each line actually has a different past, present, and future. So the idea that we kind of say that, the past is done, like we can't change the past, we have the past we have. We know that the present is something we're living in. And okay, the future, we have all these infinite futures. But it's not just infinite futures, it is also infinite pasts. Because the past is not creating the present is creating the past. The present creates the future, and the present creates the past. And ultimately, in the now here, there is no past and future. And so the present now here is actually all there is. So when we jump timelines, every single time we jump timelines, billions of times a second, you actually have a different past to the one that you might be recalling and recounting. I have a different past to the one I might be recalling and recounting. And so we really can, if it feels good to us, aligned to us, we really can let go of this idea that I have to be this certain particular me because of the programs and patterns and conditions and habits and traumas that I have experienced in my past. They just keep shaping me and recreating me. No, they're only shaping you and recreating you when you keep choosing to attach to them. And you do not have to keep reattaching to them, because every time you jump, you can imagine yourself as a clean, clear slate.
Yeah, exactly. This is where there is a phenomenon in the spiritual world, that there is this healing loops. So you need to heal this, you need to heal that, and so on and so forth. The intention is good. But the problem is that you manifest more and more and more and more and more of it, and more stuckness and more healing to do before you get it. It's like an infinite loop.
Yeah, that that idea of we can use that idea of the healing loop. We can use the idea of like a karmic loop or a karmic cycles. Again, everything is just a story we can tell, and it's going to look different from different perspectives through different perceptions. And so, for example, the idea of karma, the word karma itself simply means action. It just means action. It literally is just reminding us that the actions I take affect everything. Like literally, I can just choose to keep taking the same action. And yes, I am going to feel like I am stuck in a loop. If I keep taking the same action, I am going to feel like I'm stuck in the same loop. Yeah. And yet I can choose to take a different action, and suddenly I can feel like I'm free from the loop. Now, ultimately, a lot of the work I do from one perspective, through one perception, you could say that I'm supporting people to be able to release all of their karma. But what that really means, and what I'll always remind people, is that means I am here to help you to remember that it was always an illusion anyway. Truly releasing karma just means that you really do remember, and you feel that true awareness in the remembering of the fact that karma was always an illusion. But it's also a useful illusion. It's been a useful illusion because it's been a way to keep energy moving. Again, we do need some of that rub up against ourselves. We do need to keep forgetting and also remembering. And so we actually, even though, you know, we might say that the most expansive experience is to be in the expansion, to be in the remembering, to be in the detachment where we just allow it all to flow, that doesn't mean that's where we're meant to constantly be. We have to also keep forgetting. We have to also keep contracting, and we have to also keep reattaching to things. That's actually a useful part of moving things along. But there absolutely is a place and space that we can come to where we have a heightened sense of awareness of ourselves doing that. So even though we are forgetting, even though we are contracting, even though we are reattaching to things, there's this heightened awareness that kind of knows that we have absolute freedom of choice in that, and that we're doing it therefore in purpose, and it's actually a powerful part of the ultimate expansion. And so, you know, often people will say to me, like, what's the point then? Like, if we have to keep going through these like things, like, what is the ultimate point? Like, am I ever going to like feel consistently like good and aligned and okay? And I'm like, again, it depends where you're asking me, in which dimension do you want to feel consistently good and aligned and okay? Because no, in the third dimension of physical form and matter, you cannot have consistency in that. Physical matter, the body, things around us are meant to shift and change, and so you cannot have consistency in that third dimension. Can you have consistency in the fourth dimension in terms of that? No, not necessarily, because there are always infinite options available to you and you get to choose. But you can have absolute, if you want consistency, a kind of constant sense of maybe peace, alignment, then actually the fifth dimension is the place really to come to, because you can have a consistent alignment perspective. It's going to then offer you infinite perceptions of alignment and misalignment, and infinite experiences of alignment and misalignment, but you can continue to hold. I don't mean tightly or gripping on, but you can continue to hold that frequency of alignment in the higher dimensional aspects of self, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think the contractions also become shorter and shorter.
Yeah,
it's like you have more distance to it, and it doesn't last for ages. So the more awareness you have, the slightly easier it is. So, for example, and sometimes I enjoy also emotions when I cry, when I watch a movie, or
fun.
Or I love anger. I know anger is not it's not a real popular sentiment in the spiritual world, but I love it because it's really powerful and energetic, and I feel, yeah, I'm going to do this.
I actually went through a phase a few years ago now, where I went through probably about 3 years where I had actually alchemized so much of what you could call the anger frequency that I didn't actually feel it or experience it for probably like 3 years. And of course, in the moment at the time, I'm like, oh, wow, this is like some amazing thing. And like, this is super powerful. And look, we can alchemize a frequency so much that we don't have to feel it anymore. And at the same time, oh my gosh, when it kind of started, I don't want to use the phrase coming back, because it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't like I was going back to something. It really was when I started moving forwards into more of what I'd call that fire, that true fire energy. It's a real solar plexus like fire energy, where then I was able to experience what you might call anger, but it does feel different to how it used to feel, because I don't have attachment to it, I suppose, right? And so without the attachment to that anger, oh my gosh, it's such a powerful, beautiful frequency. Like that solar plexus fire is so good. And it's also the one we really need right now. Can you seriously not hear Tilly now meowing her head off? She's going crazy. She's like, yeah, anger. Come on, let's talk about anger. You know, that anger frequency, that fire frequency is exactly what's needed right now. We in terms of what's going on in more what I refer to as like the 7th dimension of it all right now, the connected collective consciousness. And then in the 8th dimension, which is more our kind of collective Akashic records, where we could kind of like see the infinite timelines of like infinite collectives of self, and how that all looks across what we might map to be a past, a present, and a future. When we look into these dimensions currently right now, actually what is being activated within the wider, higher collective frequency is one of the things you asked about earlier. It's freedom. Freedom is absolutely kind of the phase we are in, is this remembering, this reassembling the members, putting the pieces, parts, facets of self as source back together. We are remembering freedom right now, which is why you even felt called to ask that question. And when I say that, remember, I mean ultimately remembering it as a vibrational frequency, and then of course remembering it down through each of the dimensions, remembering the you know, mind's choice we have in it, the body's feeling and experience we have in it. And what happens is that when we are remembering something, we have to remember all of the aspects around it, and particularly we have to remember what the mind might say is the contrast to it. So if we have the pole of polarity where we've got freedom on one end, then whatever we might think and believe and perceive is on the other end, we have to activate that up within our collective consciousness. That's going to trickle then down through into our individual awareness and experience. We have to activate the contrast. And so actually, anger and frustration, particularly frustration is like a really specific vibration of it, is one of the ones that is on the other end of the polar polarity to freedom. And also, of course, a broader term that's on the other end is fear, right? Fear is one of the things that when we attach to our perception of fear, and fear being bad and wrong and scary, and we're fearful of the fear, we then cage ourselves in, and suddenly we don't feel free, right? And then actually that fire, that anger, that frustration is a really useful activator to like get us back into action. Again, we come to the karma, the action. We recognize and remember, oh, hang on, I don't have to keep taking the same action and spinning around the same loops. I can take a different action. And one of the main actions for me that I will always remind myself of first is actually to truly surrender into and make friends with the frequency that I might be saying is contrasting, right? And so to actually recognize that fear in and of itself is not wrong or bad. Fear is not something to run away from or to try and avoid. Fear is not something to alchemize in a way where we believe alchemization is to try and delete, diminish, or deny something. No, fear is something to truly remember the power of fear. Fear is a really amazing activating frequency. And ultimately, on that pole of polarity, fear and freedom is one whole pole. It is ultimately the same frequency viewed from different perspectives through different perceptions. And we're here to remember that it is one whole pole. Fear and love are also often put on either end of the polar polarity. Same thing, ultimately. And so for us to truly alchemize the frequency of fear in the way that alchemy really works, which is not about moving something from one end of the pole to the other and leaving it there. Alchemy is about coming from the center, through the center, and back to the center. And so ultimately it's actually reassembling the members of the wholeness of that pole. When we truly alchemize fear, then we can, of course, end up having an experience of being able to feel even more love, even more freedom. And that is what's wanting to really expand in the collective right now, particularly that freedom aspect.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I think it shows, for example, one of the best way to get out of an anxiety crisis is anger. It's not breath work. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not emotional freedom technique and so on. So it can help.
Yes.
But the most powerful thing is anger. That is the fastest way to get out of it.
Right.
And that's why it's a very powerful emotion to have, provided you don't stay in there.
Right.
Because then it becomes bitterness. But I've been quite surprised that I was amused within the last month, that I was angry at things I was not angry about anymore for a long time. And I said, oh, that's funny. And then I laughed about myself, really, really basic stuff.
Yeah.
Like someone cutting you out on the street and stuff like that. I said, oh, she's back.
As I say, that's been huge right now. So many, I've been saying to so many people, so many clients, in collective groups that I've been where I've been talking about the collective energy. This is exactly what we're meant to be experiencing right now. We are being offered, particularly right now, because we've had a huge collective energetic swing into a phase of more expansion. In the macro of it all, we are now being invited to really, truly, almost the phrase that comes is be the princess and the pea, right? So if we think of that story of the princess and the pea, where she can feel that teeny tiny little pea, underneath 100 soft, fluffy mattresses, and yet she can feel it. We are being called to be hyper sensitive, which really means to expand our senses, right? Sensitivity is how in tune with our senses we are. And I don't just mean our physical senses, I mean our non-physical senses as well. What we can call our clairsentience, our clairaudience, our clairvoyance, our claircognizance, etc. We are being invited to really expand our sensory perception in all places, spaces, and therefore we are being called to, how sensitive can you be? Can you feel that pea underneath 100 mattresses? And then to initially, at least, to really allow ourselves to feel into what that brings up in us. Am I actually completely fuming mad that I can feel this pea under 100 mattresses and I'm never going to sleep now, and oh my God, this is so uncomfortable? To actually be able to allow ourselves to go into that. You said anger is one of the best ways out of anxiety. Yeah, because the best way out of anything is to initially go into the thing, right? When you go inwards, when you truly lean in, surrender in to what's wanting to come up and wanting to flow, and you roll with that without making it wrong, without saying, oh, I need to try to change this, there's something bad and wrong about this, I don't like this. When you actually allow yourself to feel it, that is the easiest way that ultimately it's going to alchemize itself and it's going to release itself. Because again, alchemy is not about trying to get from one end of the polar polarity to the other. Fear is wrong, love is good, and so I'm trying to get from fear to love. No, it's always to return to the center. It's always to come to that place and space where we say, actually, fear and love, just as beautiful, just as powerful. And so, yeah, using a particular vibration that allows you to activate yourself more deeply into the experience you're having. Like anger can be really good, you know, other people might have different ones. It's such a powerful way to do it rather than trying to transcend it. You know, yes, at some point you are going to remember a more ascended, neutral perspective. Wonderful. But that's not necessarily, in the experience of it, it's not necessarily the first place to go to. And the irony of that is it's not necessarily the first place for you to choose to go to, because it is the first place that is activated. So it's already activated. That fifth dimensional higher perspective, neutral perspective of it all already exists and is activated. And so actually, when you remember that, then you can just go down to the experience.
Yeah. And it's almost as you are seeing yourself at the same time. It's not, you are not in it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Can I ask a last question?
Of course.
Okay. How does it look concretely? Because you have a really interesting story, and how you came. We've known each other since, I think, 2019, probably.
Yeah, probably.
And you were a mindset coach at that time, and then you pivoted to spirituality full in. You went completely. You embraced it.
I did.
And what I want to know is, in your concrete day-to-day life, how is it to embody your higher self? So do you sit and meditate, or how do you communicate? How do you get information? Is it a knowing? Is it some voices? How does it happen? Can you provoke it, or do you wait for it to come to you? What is a normal Joanna day?
Love this question, because usually when I answer this question for people, and I really do, I share as much of this as possible, what I'm about to say, but a lot of people almost don't take on board my answer because they can't assimilate that with actually like who I'm being in lots of ways. You would imagine, in terms of like who I am and what I do and the work I do, that yeah, I'm sitting here meditating all the time, or I'm journaling, or I'm like tuning in, or, you know, when I'm going on these journeys around the world, that, you know, I know are powerful, like activating frequencies, like the solar plexus chakra of the planet, or like different places. You'd imagine I'm doing all these crazy rituals and ceremonies. No, right? No, I don't. That's not actually how I live at all. Of course, as with everything, it's been a journey. It's been a constant shifting and moving, right? And so initially, as you said, when we first met, more of what I was doing is what I would refer to as mindset coaching. And at the same time, actually, anyone who experienced it realized that that wasn't really what we were doing. It was an aspect, but of course, that's because the mind, that fourth dimension of it all, I know is so powerful. And so, yes, we were looking at the fourth dimension of it all. But ultimately, in order to look at the fourth dimension, you have to already be in a fifth dimensional state, right? So really what I was doing was holding the frequency of people's fifth dimensional individual souls from a perspective more in me of a sixth dimensional oversoul place, and then allowing them, supporting them, activating them to notice that fourth dimensional mindset is a place that they can really play with, right? So I was doing exactly what I'm doing now, just describing it in a different way. And so when I then, I suppose, continued on that journey, and it did really naturally evolve into recognizing more what was happening, and starting to like just know that the nudges I was getting, or, you know, we could say the voices that I was hearing, or the things that I was seeing in my mind's eye, or these physical like feelings and sensations in my body when I was, you know, with somebody, starting to really notice all of those. It did lead me on a bit of a journey where, yeah, I did a bit of meditation. I did, you know, particularly with the mindset stuff, I'd be doing the journaling stuff. You know, I've been into crystals. I've done all those things, right? But what I love now, as I suppose, you know, kind of bring us full circle, we said right at the beginning, is that ultimately what I'm here to do in the world through who I be in the world is to really help people to remember that we're here really just to play. We're here just to be human and to play, right? And so actually my life for the last few years just looks like me just living a very human life. And so my day to day is, you know, I don't actually really do any kind of meditating. I don't do any journaling. I don't really do any of that anymore. It is a lot of me sitting on my sofa watching TV with my cat on my lap. It's a lot of, you know, we recently moved house and we're right on the canal. And so we've got the water right in front of the house and a lovely place to sit, and nature. It's a lot of me just sitting out and, you know, reading a book and feeding the birds and, you know, looking at the ducklings and et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of, you know, me doing the washing up, making dinner, getting annoyed that I have to make dinner and do the washing up. It's a lot of very, very human things where what's so beautiful is that the more human I am, the more what we could call intuitive nudges just come in thick and fast, right? And so I am constantly receiving, feeling, remembering, knowing, experiencing vibrational frequencies moving through me. I'm constantly seeing things in my mind's eye, hearing things in my mind's ear, you know, just knowing certain things about self, about others, just things that are kind of coming in all the time. But what's powerful is that because I've allowed this to really unfold as a process, and so I've kind of allowed it to unfold in my experience seemingly slowly, actually, in terms of the way I've been experiencing it, even though for a lot of people it might have seemed like it was an overnight shift, right? I have never felt overwhelmed by any of it. And so, yes, I'm constantly tuned into all dimensions and getting messages and channeling things through and, you know, knowing things about people that, you know, of course, they've never told me, etc. But it never feels overwhelming. It always feels actually really safe and familiar and easy. And it comes in so many little ways. And what's also really powerful is that I've never questioned any of it. The beauty for me about the difference of when something comes in more from the mind to when it comes in from soul, source, oversoul, the higher dimensions of it all, is that when it comes in from the mind, I might then have another aspect of the mind that questions it, because that's what's meant to happen. The mind throws up one option and then it'll give up another option, another option, another option. When it comes from soul and source, as you know, so much of it for me does nowadays, there's no questioning, there's no doubt, there's no I need to justify this, prove this, I need other people to believe me. And so because I stand so firm and sure in the frequency of it, even though I will always say to people, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, 99.9% of the time, it absolutely does resonate with the person that I've tuned into, and I'm sharing what's coming up in their frequency and maybe telling them things about themselves that they've never told anyone. It does resonate because I don't have any kind of ego in it. There's no attachment for me as to whether they say I'm right or wrong, because I'm not coming from a place where right or wrong even exists. I am literally just channeling through the frequency, and I am offering words that match that frequency. And you know, that's where I kind of can leave it, and then they can pick it up. And because I don't have a finger in the pie of like how exactly they pick it up and exactly what that means to them and what they do with it, then it comes through in such an aligned, neutral way. Yeah, that it's a really kind of beautiful experience. So I don't have that overwhelm that I know some people can have, or that questioning that some people can have when they're wanting to to lean more into their intuition. If it is pure intuition, there's no questioning.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And that's the secret, in my opinion. Just don't question it.
Yeah.
I'm no, because I'm a big questioner, but it's also part of my frequency to be a questioner.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what you mean with people. So I have it less with people and more with systems. So it's like I know intuitively how things click together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I will have sometimes that I will guess the name of someone or have some kind of intuitions, and I have something that I don't master yet. I get a lots of pictures and faces, and lots of worlds I don't know about, and I don't know exactly what to do about it. But it's not a vision; it's really information coming to me.
Yeah.
Because when you vision something, it's forced, or it's also a way to do it. But you imagine, you create something. It's coming to me, and I don't know how to interpret it exactly, and what it is for, or if it's just a coincidence, I don't know. But I don't have this, that I can surely say every time what happened in the life of someone and so on and so forth. It's just more about spiritual system and architecture, if you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which to me is the most fascinating stuff, right? Like having these conversations about how the dimensions work and the metaphysics of it all and all of that. This is what I love talking about. Like I absolutely love working directly with clients. I love having that complete privilege of being allowed to tune in towards their frequency and share what's coming up for them. But the real, like a massive joy for me is that, I used to be a primary school teacher. Like I'm an absolute teacher. I'm here to be a teacher, really, first and foremost. And so I love being able to tune into all these things and all of this kind of this wisdom. And as you say, the kind of the architecture of it all, the systems of it all, and to be able to relay that is an absolute joy for me. And the real joy comes, as you just described, this is not learnt knowledge coming from the mind. I have never read a book or anything about the dimensions, the chakras, like any of that, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
I haven't taught the mind these things, and now I'm regurgitating information, facts from my mind.
Yeah.
It's all just stuff that channels through. And usually for me, it really does just channel through. I really don't know I know it until I'm saying it, until I'm speaking it, or until I'm writing it down. I don't know I know it, because again, it's not the mind having this knowledge. And that's the beautiful thing. So what you just described there is also, that's your channel aspect of self that is downloading that information, something that is literally information. It's being formed as it comes through as a frequency. It's forming itself then into, words that can be put around it. Like that's such a beautiful thing. And so for you, what I see for you is that channel aspect of self is not necessarily one of your forefront energetic expressions to use for collective and humanity directly. You're less likely to be the person who says, I'm a channel, come and work with me as a channel, right? Your channel aspect is really highly tuned in. It's tuned in for self, because it then gives you the information that's needed, the wisdom that's needed to be able to actually come to that connector bridger spot, which in terms of where that sits between the chakras, that's between solar plexus and heart chakra, which is the most powerful spot in the human body, literally that point there. This is the center of it all. When you are able to utilize your channel for self, you can then connect the dots for humanity and for the collective. And that's such a powerful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, it is. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. I could listen to you for hours, really. I will just stop the recording. Just one moment.